What's happening, guys? Cooper Carter here for G66, and on this week's Fractal Friday, I want to show you a couple of my favorite features from the brand new firmware version 19.02 for the Axe 3. All right, so the latest and greatest firmware from Fractal Audio Systems is here for the flagship Axe 3. The firmware version is 19.02. When you guys go into FractalBot to update your units, you will be, of course, automatically greeted with the release notes for this firmware, which I highly recommend you guys read in detail. Here you will find a complete list of all the changes and all of the updates that have been made to the units with this firmware. But here are the 4 biggest highlights for me with this update. Again, check the release notes because there have been a lot more changes that I'm going to cover in this video. First off, we have several brand new amplifier types, bringing the total number of amplifiers in the Axe 3, for those of you who are counting, to 297 different amps. So we are almost at 300 different amp types in this amazing box. Here are a couple of the new ones. First up, we've got updates to the 59 bass guy amp, of course, an absolutely classic model based on a Fender Bassman. I use this amp a whole lot for everything from single coil bluesy tones to more overdriven humbucker type tones. With the new firmware, we now have both drive knobs on the amp modeled, and we've got the 59 bass guy normal type, which brings the total number of these 59 bass guys to 3. We've got the normal input, the bright input, and then the jumped input, where both inputs are being used at the same time. So here's the normal channel. Next up, definitely in my top 10 most used amps in the Axe 3, the 5 F8 Tweed, modeled on Keith Urban's personal #1 Fender Super Tweed, an incredibly rare amp, a beautiful amp. And here, once again, we now have both the drive knobs modeled on this amp, and we have the normal, the jumped, and the bright inputs from the amplifier. Definitely check this amp out. It is an amazing pedal platform. It is beautifully dynamic. It can really capture just about the best of any guitar that you put into it. And this jumped version of the amp is just too much fun not to show you guys. Next up, a long-awaited addition to the Axe 3, the clean channels of the JMP-1. This is, of course, based on the legendary Marshall rack amp, the JMP-1, which we've had the dirty channels of for quite a while. JMP-1 OD1, OD1 bass shift 2, and 2 bass shift. Now we have clean 1 and 2 with the bass shift of those 2 channels as well. The most interesting thing about this amplifier is it actually was built with a fixed passive tone stack. So the bass, middle, treble, and presence are actually baked into the amplifier. So when you make adjustments to the bass, the middle, the treble, and the presence, you're not actually affecting the gain structure of the amp like you would with the BMTP of a normal amp. But on the JMP, you're actually adjusting an active output EQ. So as you can see, the adjustments that I've made here are reflected on this output EQ page. This is a very different approach to dialing an amp in than a lot of people are used to, and it's much closer to getting the majority of your tone out of the output EQ on a Mesa Boogie Mark series amplifier than it is dialing in your average Fender or Marshall amp. Now, of course, because this is Fractal land and we can go so much deeper than you'd ever be able to go on a physical amplifier, if you go to the ideal page here, you can affect the fixed tone stack of this amplifier. So that will be changing your tone in the preamp section of the amp. But 5 all the way up on bass, middle, treble, and presence will give you the default settings of the amp in the physical world. So let's check out this Clean 1. This is a really instant access switch almost for a super glassy clean. Now, the dirty channels of the JM Pre have been in the Axe 3 for a while, but now these knobs here, the bass, middle, treb, and presence that we were talking about before, have been mapped to this output EQ, making the whole experience a bit more authentic to the physical amplifier. And this amp type is just too good not to play. I mean, come on. And of course, because this is the go-to amp for one of my all-time favorite bands, you've just got to do this. Next up on our list of additions, a brand new way to make delay even cooler. So right here on our JM Pre, we've got this nice dual delay here. Cool enough already. But now, we now have a third LFO in the delay, in addition to the first two that we've always had that allow you to introduce a little bit of warble into your delay tails, suggestive maybe of a tape type delay. But now this third LFO allows us to select as a target the level, the pan, or the spread of the delay. So if I go ahead and select level, and we've got a rate here of 4 Hertz and a depth of 100%, check out what happens to our delay tails. We now have a triangle LFO oscillating at 4 Hertz on the level of the delays. So what we have in a sense is a tremolo on our delay tails. And if I do the same thing to the pan, we now are oscillating the panning of the delay itself at 4 Hertz. So you can see that this allows some very cool effects. Now I'm gonna go ahead and switch this back to none so that you guys can have the JMP the way that I had it before. And of course, as always, you can download this preset from the Axe Change at the link in the video description. Let's go up to scene 7 here, and I've got a tremolo delay already selected. So there is a delay type here called stereo trim delay. And as you can see, by default, it loads us in a nice sine LFO with the target of the level. So check this out. And fittingly, we also have a pan delay type that gives you an instant preset for LFO3 targeting the pan. Now notice the delay itself is actually a mono delay. What we have here is simply a, right now, dotted 8th note tempo delay, but because of this third LFO that is modulating the pan of this delay, what we get is a really cool stereo panning delay that sounds a little bit like this. Next up, there have been a huge number of improvements and additions to the FC controller abilities on the Axe-Fx 3. And again, I highly encourage you guys to check out the release notes in detail for a complete list. First up, we have a new feature for preset select in bank buttons, which of course allow you to select any preset in the bank you're currently viewing. Right here, I'm on the very first preset in the unit, so I'm seeing presets 1 through 10 or 0 through 9, depending on what your display offset is set to. And the new feature is second press previous preset, which I have set to on in every preset button in this layout. And what this allows you to do is search wherever you want using the bank up and bank down buttons, get to a preset that's very far away from the preset you were just on, and then simply double tap any preset button that has this second press previous preset switch turned on, and you will instantly return to the preset you were just on. This is really useful for going right back to a preset when you've gotten very far away using the FC controller and you don't want to scroll all the way back down with the bank buttons. Next up, if we go to the FC config menu here, you'll see that we now have the ability to invert the mini displays, which will turn the backgrounds black and the words white, which may be very useful depending on what your stage conditions are. This has been a feature that many of you have requested, and I'm sure you're glad to see it in the unit. And finally, a feature that was added in firmware version 19, but I didn't do an overview video of that. This feature immediately got added to my custom performance screen, which you can see right here. And if we go to this tuner button, you'll see that the hold function is now something called utility amp level save, which many of you may be familiar with. It allows you to raise or lower the level of your amplifier block and then instantly save the preset. But here we now have the ability to set this to 0 dB so that this switch acts as a save function for your preset on your FC controller. This is super useful for when you are making changes to which effects are on, which scenes you want to be on. You can simply now tap or hold any button that has this feature assigned to it, and you will save your preset. Now, of course, right now this is displaying AMP10, which is the function mini display label. I'm just going to change this to custom and type in save. And now I have a save switch for my preset. Super useful. And now finally, the oversampling mode switch. Now the oversampling mode switch allows you to select between best performance and minimum latency. Now I saved this feature for last on our highlight list because I want to stress that the latency on the Axe-Fx 3 is already incredibly low. It's just a few milliseconds. This is an industry standard fast unit. For everything that's being processed, this unit is incredibly quick. So best performance is going to give you the standard amount of latency that we have always had, again, a really tiny amount. But if you select instead minimum latency on this oversampling mode, you're going to be sacrificing an, I think, barely audible amount of quality in your audio in exchange for about half a millisecond of latency for the amp block and half a millisecond of latency for the drive block, giving you a total latency on minimum latency of less than 1.5 milliseconds. So again, on best performance, you're getting the exact same performance you've always had on the Axe-Fx 3 with the full sonic quality. And on minimum latency, you're sacrificing a tiny bit of audio quality that I will show you in a second. I challenge you to even hear the difference. And for that, you will get less than 1.5 seconds of latency on the unit. So let's listen. Best performance, and then minimum latency. See if you can tell the difference. So those are some of my favorite new features in firmware version 19.02, but as always, chime in the comments and let me know what you've been enjoying about this firmware, and also leave me a comment and let me know what you'd like to see on Fractal Friday. And as always, if you guys want to get the absolute most out of your Fractal Audio Systems product, whether that's the Asphex 3, the FM9, or the FM3, make sure to go to classes.coopercarter.com for my complete Fractal Audio Masterclass series. As always, for all things Fractal Audio Systems, keep it right here on G66. Make sure to subscribe to this channel, thumbs up, and again, leave me a comment, let me know what you've got going on, and I will see you guys next week on Fractal Friday.